right, welcome along to the RTÉ Soccer Podcast. Raf Diallo here. You can watch or listen to this podcast weekly via RTÉ.ie, YouTube, Apple, Spotify and beyond, and you can follow on your platform of choice to get the latest episodes. Lots to talk about today, from the Champions League semi-finals to the weekend's League of Ireland action and a lot more, and I'm joined by Graham Gartland and Eoin Doyle to discuss that. And where we're going to start though first is just the confirmation last week that John O'Shea is going to be in charge in an interim basis for the June friendlies with the same management team from March, except Brian Kerr, who had prior personal and professional commitments. And I think, Graham, we can probably take it as given that in terms of the permanent role, the FAI are looking elsewhere rather than John O'Shea. But is there even a small inkling of an audition for the longer term for him?
I don't know, maybe. I think that was over the other two games. That's what the idea behind it was, that John will go in, and if he done well and really grabbed it, then the job could be his. But I think the fact that there's no standout candidate, maybe it could be John O'Shea in the long term. But again, I know the way the interview was done and all that stuff, and announcing John O'Shea, and John O'Shea was unaware of it and stuff like that. It just probably wasn't the best way of coming out. But John obviously has his own ambitions and what he wants to do, and this is just adds to that. And if he can come in and do a really good job, and it's more experience for him, it's better for him going forward as a coach or a manager in the long term. That might be something down the line. I don't think he's done himself any harm with how he's carried himself in what he's done for the FAI, and the fact that he's there for them. And I think down the line the FAI will appreciate that along the way, because he is really good to deal with, John. So hopefully I think the FAI are doing the right thing at times in terms of waiting for the right person and financially making sure it's right, because, and we'll touch on this later with the academy stuff, there's no budget. And if you throw money at a big manager coming in on a big budget, you're taking it away from something else. And we've seen that with the academy figures, that if you're taking money away from an academy, it doesn't really matter what you throw at the top end of it. It's not going to make a difference long term to the future of Irish football.
Yeah, because we might just touch on the academy issue straight away. So this was coming off the back of Will Clark, the FAI LOI Academy Development Manager, speaking last week, and he does these annual updates. And I'll read the quote first. We'll get into the numbers and that a little bit later, but the figures and data don't lie. We're on a certain trajectory at the moment, and if you look at the facts and the figures and look at the level of investment in academy staff, and look at the FIFA rankings and who's qualifying for World Cups and who isn't, we're bottom of the table when it comes to all these key metrics. And I suppose, Eoin, what you take from that, regardless of who's the senior men's manager, who's going to take charge of the under-21s or any of those international age grades, it's all academic when you actually extrapolate that and then compare it to the situation in terms of academies and the struggle in terms of bringing players through.
Yeah, and I think if you kind of look at the stats that Will Clark was putting out there, that it really, really suggests that it's going to get a lot worse before we get any better. These things take time, take money, and we don't really have either of them at the minute. And then obviously the biggest one for me was like 10 years ago, I think we 30 players playing across the top 5 leagues, and that's halved in 10 years now, down to 15 or 16 players. And you can imagine in 10 years' time it'll probably go the other way or the same way again. So really damaging kind of facts that came out last week. But obviously, and to be fair to Will and Shane and everyone in there at that level of the FAI, I think they have the answers. They know that things need to change. They know that having 24 academies probably isn't the right answer for elite football in Ireland. That it probably has to be brought down to 5 or 6 or whichever number they land on for us to be able to produce top level players. And then it's just a matter of getting the finances behind that. Obviously, we're constantly shouting at the government to try help us out. I think the biggest appointment that the FAI have to make is this new CEO. I don't care about any other role in there. I think for the FAI to get any money off the state, they need to be respected. They need to, whoever goes in there has to go in, stop all this noise, all this negativity that breeds out of football in Ireland, and show that this is now a capable industry within sport in Ireland, so we can actually go ahead and be accountable, and that when the money does arrive, that we put it into the right areas and that it's used properly, so we can produce players going forward. So there was lots to take from last week. Obviously, Gart's a hell of a lot more of it than I do, obviously from being in the academy business the last few years and stuff, but damaging stuff.
Yeah, because Graham, if we actually look at the numbers in terms of the finances first, so the FAI are looking for approximately 5.5 million a year to invest in academies. They need to spend around 10 million a year to just be competitive with other nations, the type of nations we would want to be sort of competitive with. But again, obviously, only have half of that figure available, and then the average academy budget of an LOI club is around 500,000, which is in the same bracket as for some of the real European minnows. Other figures as well. Only 10 full-time academy staff in the whole country in comparison, which is in line with minnows of European football like Northern Ireland, Luxembourg, and Andorra. And if you actually look at the stats in terms of like there's a graphic here that's been quite helpful from the Indo, which actually really shows how stark it is. So as I said, 10 academy staff, full-time academy staff within Irish football, covering 24 academies. If you look, say, at a country similar population, Croatia, 190 full-time staff covering 10 academies. It is stark, and from an Irish point of view, not sustainable.
No, it's not. And we'll end up in groups with them teams that you mentioned. I know Northern Ireland probably qualified a while ago for tournaments, but like the likes of Andorra and all these countries that we're competing against, that's where it would be because of our resources going into these players, and it has to be player led. And the simple fact is, if you're investing in players, that investment will come back to you later on down the road when you are qualifying or you're more competitive or they're playing at a higher level. Like Owen said, the big thing for me, like you said, building that trust with the government and the FAI is big in terms of securing finances. So that trust element hasn't been there with the FAI for a long time. It's not just this regime. So we weren't on a good foot with the government in any way. So it's going to them and saying, but what Shane and what Will Clark have done is they laid out a plan to say, if you invest in this is the plan we'll follow. So now the government can go, have you invested in that plan that you actually presented to us? So the money is accountable now. So that's the first step. The money is accountable for these plans. You look at Portugal would be a big one for me, is that they've probably 6 or 7 full-time academies, but they're ultra competitive. And I know that that's probably youth sport and stuff can't be like that, but it is in terms of how their development is really good and it's really high and they're producing. And then all the other clubs around that, whether it's what we would call grassroots club, can pick that up and keep their players going. And if one of them comes late, great. If one of them tails off, great. So I always say the grassroots clubs are a springboard for players to go on to maybe play in the academy, but they're also a safety net that if something happens to them, that you can still play football. I think what the academy system has done in this country is it's allowed players to play longer. So, and I want to tell you this, and I was similar. Under 15s, the schoolboy clubs would generally stop. A lot of clubs would fall, their teams wouldn't exist at 16 and 17. And you really lost a lot of players who still wanted to play football, and we lost a lot of late developers because of that. I think what the academy system has done is it's increased the participation levels for 17s, 19s, and 20s at a really good level. Somebody like Owen would have benefited from that because he would have came through a Rovers. I stayed a year later to do my leaving cert and then went. But like 6 of my team went to the UK or under 15. You know what I mean? Your whole team just goes across. So I think in that sense, the academy has done really well, but it does need to be streamlined now. It does need to go, the government need to look and the FAI need to look and go, who's actually investing in their academies? And they're the academies that we're going to help as well. Because you have to go with the clubs who are willing to put money in themselves instead of the clubs that maybe aren't, that are doing it as part of the cycle to get a license, and then make it like they become nearly like centers of excellence. And then the FAI can then have more time with them as well. The FAI can then go to the clubs and say, look, we've invested in this. We want your players now for these weeks. We want the players for this Easter break. We want them for 10 weeks or not 10 weeks, sorry, 10 days over the summer. We're going to run a camp with them. And it becomes a little bit more inclusive, becomes a little bit like everybody's working together. Because I do even feel that when the academies came in, the grassroots clubs got a little bit, their noses out of joint, and the academy clubs are like, well, we're going to do it. The trust wasn't there for League of Ireland clubs to do it back then. It's starting to build again. But it needs to be this, where we're all together for the betterment of Irish football, not just for their club, not just for grassroots, not just for academy, but ultimately then the bar for the top level, our 21s and our first team, becomes a lot higher. And that's but it has to be a push up instead of like hiring a really good senior manager to work with players that just aren't there at the moment. So it has to be pushed up the way rather than trickling down.
Yeah, and from an LOI perspective, which academies are, in terms of best practice, doing best at the moment, or at least showing elements that you can build around in the future?
I want to know this as well. Pats have produced a lot of players. They brought a lot of players through. Rovers have produced a lot of players and brought a lot of players through. Facility-wise, Rovers will be there. Cork have done a great job with Liam Carney. Derry have done a really good job as well. Finn Harps have done a good job under Kevin McHugh. UCD have done really well because obviously they know that the young players will go to their 17, 19 and they know they might have a chance to get into the first team quicker. So, but it's about that investment. Like, them clubs are willing to invest. Bows have done well. Obviously, we've gone back to their partnership with Kevin's, which has been really giving them a lot of an advantage going in when they started this. That when they just basically took their Kevin's and moved them over to Bows, and it's done really well for them. Obviously, Evan Ferguson would have been a prime example of one of those. But like you said, I think the bit that showed up was what they're doing at grassroots level. And what we're looking at is when you see it, some teams down the country are only playing 2 games a week. Some of them are playing 7-a-side when they should be playing 5-a-side. Some of them are jumping straight to 9-a-side and missing out to 7-a-side. And we know that for the development side of it, the small side of games is so important for the first 2 years with 5-a-side, and then 7-a-side for 2, and then 9-a-side for 1. And if you miss them stages along the way, you're going to lose a lot of technically gifted footballers, because the big and strong ones will be better on the bigger pitches, but the technical players need to really work through those. And then the bigger players become more technical because they're having to play in small-sided games. So that's something that needs to happen at grassroots level. And then obviously by the time the academies come in at 14, then it becomes obviously 11-a-side.
Yeah, and I suppose, Owen, as well, like imagine a world where that investment comes in and you can see the potential is here. I mean, even watching some of the club football, both in England and on the continent there yesterday, I mean, and Cork City being the example, like Mark O'Mahony starting for Brighton yesterday. Obviously, Evan Ferguson out injured at the moment, but Mark O'Mahony's been getting progressively closer to the first team. He gets his first start now. Okay, Bournemouth beat them 3-0, so it gets a little bit overshadowed. But then I was watching a little bit of Leon playing Monaco, Jake O'Brien at the back, who we did talk about a few months ago when he got called up to the Ireland squad, and he's been having a great season. So the talent is there, but it just needs a bit of a push on to support these clubs.
Yeah, 100%. And these are the lucky ones that are breaking through. Like, we'll always have 1 or 2 lucky ones that are just kind of able to get over the line, maybe have the natural technical ability and the natural athleticism to go on and be top footballers. But we won't be able to produce a team. We won't be able to produce an international team that can qualify for tournaments like we want to if we don't have this investment. And as Gareth touched on it, like it'll come back to us. It'll come back to us so much. There'll be huge transfer fees coming in for these kids coming into League of Ireland clubs in the future. Obviously with SAC, please God, being able to qualify for these tournaments will bring in huge revenue into the association, into the country. So it's a massive positive. There's not many negatives to it. The only negative probably out there from the government's point of view is that they probably feel that the FAI aren't a reliable place to send money to. That's probably the biggest issue they have. It's heavily in debt. They haven't painted themselves very well publicly in the last 30 years. So it's about that trust now. Just they have to go in, start laying like foundation levels of trust that we've got plans here. This is how they'll work, and this will be the outcome. Please invest in us, and we'll be able to produce. But as you're talking there, like Mark O'Mahony coming on, like, or starting, like, just to touch on him, I know he came off at half time in the game, they're losing 3-0, but like, I actually love seeing that for young players. Like, there's nothing better than a young player learning a tough lesson really early. Like, I've seen it happen with Sam Curtis at Pats. We were playing, I think it was the second starter playing at home to Shells, and he got booked early on. He should have got sent off before half time. Gaffer pulls him off at half time. He's down to dumps. You feel at the moment you think it's the end of the world. My career's over, but it's not. That's not how it works. He's learned his lesson. He never made the same mistake twice. Now I'm not saying Mark went out and made mistakes on the weekend for Brighton, but he'll know now going forward, I need to produce more, or I'll need to do something else to make sure I stay on that pitch for as long as possible. But no, it's great to see one of the young lads breaking through. And Cork have been really good. They've got more coming through. Uma's coming in. Like Tim down there is really shown trust in his young players down there, and they've got more coming through, which is good to see.
Yeah, Carl O'Sullivan as well, in the Ireland
That's
in
right.
Ireland 17s
But
is
the
another one
FAI,
to watch out
Raf,
for. Yeah,
like the FAI need to show more togetherness as well. Like they've produced this plan. They produced this plan 3 or 4 months ago, and everybody in the FAI needs to get behind it. And so this is what we're doing. We're all together on this, and we're pushing it. And there can't be mixed messages from the FAI on this. This is the academy plan. This is what we're trying to do. This is what we're going for. The board, everybody in the FAI needs to really get behind it and go, this is what we're doing. Mark Adams put out a good plan. Shane Robinson put out a great plan. Will Clark has backed it up. Let's go and get behind it. And we're all together. And don't be don't have fractions in it where, oh no, I'm looking at me. Go together and say, this is what we're doing. This is our plan. And if they do that, then the FAI then have to, or the government have to back it, especially with the fact that, elections and stuff coming up. Really hammer this home that you need football. Like, and I think that's where the FAI need to actually show togetherness and somebody to really lead it and grab it and say, look, this is what we're doing, and this is what we're gonna stick to this and keep pushing it for the next 10 years as long as we get it.
Yeah, and one final thing on the academies before we touch on the League of Ireland weekend, and it goes back to contact hours as well. And I'm sure, Graham, this is something that you would have first-hand knowledge of in terms of developing that next generation of talent. I think something Damien Duff, when he first came back to the League of Ireland, he hammered home just the stark contrast to what the situation is in England. You mentioned the number of academies in Portugal, which stands at 7. Now they have 315 full-time academy staff, or that work across those 7. So the amount of contact hours is going to be obviously completely different when you have 10 full-time to 24, and even with the part-time people that come in, you can't really cover that shortfall as much as you'd like.
We worked it out that we could match the contact hours 8 to 12 when we first started. This was back in 2013, 2014. We could match them hours, so we were able to do that. Then the jump from 12 to 15, we were a good bit short. We were probably 8 hours short on that, and then we had to try and make that up. We were able to make it up between 12 to 15, where we could make it up. Now the biggest jump is the full time. It's gone from nearly into full time football from 15 to 18. And it's just, you can't make that up without having full time staff. You can't make it up without having a safe building for the kids to come into every morning. And if they're doing it before training and then doing education, I've been around academies in Europe. They'll bus them in, they go and pick them up and get them there for 7 o'clock, have their breakfast, coach them from probably 9:30 till 11:30. Then they have their education, then they go back out in the afternoon. They finish their homework and then they bus them home, and they're home by 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock that evening. But everything's done. Their homework, their schoolwork, their football's all done, and they get home. But it costs a lot of money. And the problem the academies have when I'm talking to the ones in Europe is they're at the stage where they're doing too much for them. They're like, oh, we're doing too much for them. We're not even doing anything for them. You know what I mean? So that's the bit where they're at the stage where they feel they're spoiling their young players, and we're saying, I wish we could spoil them a little bit. So we're able to match them up to a certain point, but then that's the drop off. The drop off is that age is when they're nearly physically developed. They've gone through their growth spurt. They've gone through all that. Their power's settling in, but they need contact hours now. They need a lot of technical work. They need to practice on things. They need to go and do their finishing drills constantly, that it becomes habit. And that's where you build that, and you build that base. And we're just not there. And unless you have the full-time staff and the full-time facilities and all the safeguards around that comes with it, because it's not just, oh, well, we have a coach to do it. It has to be in a building. There has to be X amount of coaches there for children. There has to be safeguards in place. They have to be tagged in and tagged out. All that done properly. And what happens is we will get to that level again. The UK have done it. I went to the UK in 2000 and was around the start when all the foreign players started coming into academies, and they were signing, like Fabregas being the main one, and then PK went to United. And then the English FA said, hold on, we need to really invest in this. So the English FA invests in the English academies, but the FA now have a say in what happens to their players. And it's no coincidence that the youth teams in England have gone up and played and win tournaments. But it's no coincidence that now the first team has got to major finals now as well. And people go, oh, well, that's England, they have a bigger pool. Yeah, but they reset themselves 20, 30 years ago and decided we want to compete. And the biggest pillar for competing at the top level is having a really good youth structure in your country. It's the biggest pillar.
Yeah,
That's a UEFA study, you'll say that, not just
yeah,
the Graham Gartland study from Tala. You know what
yeah. I think
I mean?
I think Germany's probably the other example as well. Early 2000s, they were really struggling. They revolutionized their whole youth
Yeah.
structures and
They
went
got
on
to
to
the
win a World
final.
Cup
They lost 5-1 to England, and
and got
then
to the
got
World
to the
Cup. Yeah,
final that year, and then they lost to Brazil, and then they redone the whole academies even
yeah.
after getting to a final.
And then won a World Cup in 2014. I know they're having a bit of a drop off again, but I'm sure they'll reinvest again. But we'll talk League of Ireland now, and mentioned Damien Duff earlier. Well, his Shelbourne team got back to winning ways. They beat Pats 1-0 at Talca Park on Friday. Drogheda United came from behind to beat Sligo Rovers 3-1. Dundalk, first match under Noel King, they beat Bows 2-0 at Oriel Park. Derry City were 2-0 winners away at Waterford, and then Shamrock Rovers and Galway United drew 1-1 in Tala. And Shamrock Rovers back in action tonight against Drogheda as well, to cover a game that had been called off due to inclement weather earlier in March. But let's start on Shells and Pats, and let's listen to Damien Duff first, who was speaking to Tony O'Donoghue about the atmosphere and also about the fallout from his comments about Shane Farrell the previous week. And then you'll also hear the St. Pat's manager, John Daly.
Big night, big crowd, capacity crowd tonight. I mean, those are the Dublin derbies that you want, aren't they?
Yeah, and hats off to the club. They've done an amazing job. They've obviously, I think we're waiting on to get it green light, I guess. The Riverside, the safe standing, it's on both sides now. So here, the attendance is here. I think performances do help, and being at the top of the table, but I just think the buy-in from the fans has been absolutely amazing. We're nothing without them. That's why I got a fan into our huddle at the end. And yeah, the attendances are just going to get bigger and bigger, not only around the league, but most importantly, the team that I care about, Shelbourne, our attendances are just going to get bigger and bigger.
Can I ask you one other thing? You got a yellow card on Monday, another one tonight. Will you be having words with yourself? Will you be finding yourself?
No, it's, well, sorry, I think it is a fine. So the players will probably look to fine me, get their own back of me. But no, I think I left the dugout by 3-4 metres, so it wasn't for being animated. I'm always animated. And it was me, obviously. Rob told me to read the rule book, an offside rule changed 4 years ago, so I had a chat with him at the end. That's what I'm reading tonight.
I'm going to finally ask you this. Shane Farrell was, I suppose, a topic of conversation this week because of your comments about him. Is he okay? Are you okay with the way you handled it and the way it went?
I'm absolutely fine. I've slept well since. Shane's trained really well since. We've kissed, we've made up. And as always, the staff and the players, not that there was anything to diffuse, but they've seen the light-hearted side of it. The players and staff had a vote on Tuesday morning who would win in a fight between me and Shane Farrell, and hands down, Shane Farrell won, 30 votes, and I got 0, Tony.
Well done tonight.
Thank you.
John, obviously disappointing result for you tonight, but where do you think it's going wrong?
I thought we actually started the game relatively well. I thought first half an hour we were okay, and then I think they obviously scored, and I don't think we reacted well or responded well to the goal. And second half we didn't play our game. We didn't play the way we wanted to, and obviously that's why you've then looked to ring the changes quickly to try and get the game turned our way. And unfortunately for us, we didn't do enough on the night to warrant anything out of the game.
That Jake Mulroney free kick, I think, was the only shot on target.
I think Jake had one as well second half then that was straight at Conor Cairns off his left coming in from the right, so I think it was a volley. So no, look, I'm nitpicking here, 2 shots on target, you're not going to get enough out of the game, you're not going to get any out of the game, it's not good enough. Obviously disappointed, we had a big support come through as well, and you want to try and put in a level of performance that gets them going, and I don't think we've done enough tonight. You
had them in the dressing room for a long time afterwards, it seemed. I mean, was there hard talking done? I think we just need to realise that we need to get going. I think we spoke about trying to turn the tide, I suppose, and make sure we start getting 3 points on the board. I think you look at the other results tonight, and other teams have given up opportunities to go and close the gap again, and we've not taken it. And we can't keep giving teams, missing these opportunities and giving teams a head start on us. So it's something that we're going to have to remedy very, very quickly.
All right, so that is Pat's manager, John Daly. Before that, Shell's manager, Damien Duff. And Owen, just on Shelburne first, I suppose John Martin got the goal and it was well taken and sort of well set up. But it's an interesting role, sort of leading the line for Shelburne when you have Jarvis on one side who loves cutting in, and he's not going to go around the byline and try to cross the ball in. Then you've sort of the likes of either Bert or Matty Smith who also like sort of drifting inside a little bit.
Yeah, and he took the finish very well. And to be fair, they had a good few chances in the game. They looked like the only team that really wanted to go out there and win the game, if I'm being honest. I don't think Pat's really created enough on the night. Obviously only one or two shots on target, but yeah, they're doing really well this year. Shells, like obviously Duff's done a great job. Joey O'Brien as well in there with him. They're structured defensively. And then they're after bringing in a little bit of flair now. With obviously they got Jarvis going again. They've got Liam Burton there, a bit of magic, and Matty Smith's always been a threat. And yeah, like for me last year, Sean Boyd is one of the top strikers in the league, and he's only a bit par player this year. Without being disrespectful to him, and he's come in, he's come out, and he will produce goals again for them this year. I've no doubt about that. But yeah, he went with Martin the other night, and it was a great finish for him. Me personally, as a striker, I always preferred having the wingers that were out and out wingers that didn't come in unless when they came in they had that final pass where they can slip it or something. But with the likes of Jarvis and all and Bort less so than Jarvis, but Jarvis really has an eye for goal himself. When he drifts inside, he's able to chop. He can go left or right, and he's a wonderful finish.
Yeah, and interesting as well in terms of the Pats' response to the goal and throughout the game. I think John Daly sort of referenced it there in his interview with Tony that they didn't really lay a glove on Shelburne at all. Now, that partly with that is obviously Shells have a great defensive record on, but just I was looking at just tactically as the game was drifting on early in the second half, like you could see Chris Forrester almost on the toes of his own centre halves trying to get things going. And where does that kind of stem from? Because it seemed a little bit disjointed.
Yeah, they're definitely a bit out of sorts. I think if you zoom out and you see what's kind of gone on there since I suppose the end of last season at Pats is like I think there was five starters in the team on Friday night there that weren't in the team last year. So they lost a lot of key players last year. Definitely players they would have wanted to hold on to Dean Linus, Sam Curtis, Mark Doyle, Adam Murphy, Tommy Lonergan, Connor Carty. These are all players that Pats would have wanted to re-sign. Did try and re-sign. And definitely not. And then and they didn't manage to keep them. I suppose they all went on to different things. And they've come in and like it's hard just to get going straight away, like and that's what obviously after you win the cup, that's what everyone wants. Everyone expects just let's go, let's try win the league now. Let's win the league. And at the minute they're a little bit off that, but I think like when you look at how they're struggling to. When Joe Redmond comes out of the team, they're definitely struggling to not concede goals. He's such a huge loss to them. He comes off for just minutes against Derry, and they concede straight away. Obviously, the other night, when they concede the goal, I don't think they'd be that deep when the goal is scored if Joe's in the team. I think he would have, as the captain, the leader, would have had them higher up the pitch. Like John Martin wouldn't be able to get that couple of yards off Keeley to get the shot at goal. And Matty Smith wouldn't have been able to deliver the cross, even in the first place if they're higher up the pitch. And then going forward, obviously they're struggling a little bit with creating chances. But Keaton's obviously struggling with an ankle injury. He's come out, and like as Pat's do, like they're throwing such faith into the young lads. Alex Nolan's got lots of minutes so far this season, has done relatively well. And like Mason Amelia, like a teenager's leading the line for them. He needs time. He definitely needs time. So I think it's just a bit of a patience thing with the Pats fan base now. I know that's not an easy thing to hear. Nobody wants to hear that, but the season is still relatively young. You can see with Bowes probably 10 days ago, three wins in a row and they're second. There's nothing stopping Pats doing that now in the next coming weeks,
Yeah, and then Shamrock Rovers coming from behind to draw 1-1 at home to Galway United. Graham and Johnny Kenny getting the equaliser. Stephen Walsh's goal for Galway, obviously really well taken as well earlier. And Rovers had their chances, weren't particularly clinical. The penalty miss by Dylan Watts probably being the obvious thing. But the comments by Stephen Bradley to extratime.com afterwards were pretty interesting in that he was saying, it looked to me that we had a few players that got really comfortable understanding that the squad is tight at the moment. That doesn't work around here. When I saw that tonight, we'll change that fairly quickly. We might see that against Drogheda tonight, but the injuries are obviously having an effect there, but it's probably the response of the wider squad that maybe he's not too happy with.
I think that's one of the keys to their success for the last 4 years is competition for place, is that if you do become complacent, that there is a quality player waiting to take your place. And not only will he take it you could take it for, you know, a good 10 games before you get back in again. So I think that's what he's saying. He's looking for the experienced players who are still in the squad, who are still available to play, to actually step up and show, look, you have to be a good example that, yeah, we mightn't have the squad depth that threatens your position right now, but eventually we will. But you have to show people that there's a hunger constantly. You're probably right. They're not clinical. They had over 23 shots on goal, but only 3 of them are on target, and one of them being the penalty, and then the other goal. So they're having a lot of possession. They're having a lot of play. They're having chances to probably pull the trigger, but maybe not making the right decision at that time. And that's leading to a lot of like sort of wayward efforts where, like you said, 20 aren't on target. It's a good header from John Kenny to get them back in it. But Galway's game plan was good. They set in. I watched the highlights of the game. They set in well. They counter-attacked well when they could. It's a really good finish from Walsh, in fairness, because he just spins the hooker over his shoulder and he's watched it come down. I think it's Lee Grace that's closed him, and Lee's quick. But he gets the shot away early, and it's into the bottom corner. And in fairness, I done the game down there, and Galway were okay, but they lacked sort of a threat up top. And Rovers eventually go on and win the game 1-0. But this time, Galway go a goal up, and it gives them something to hold on to. And defensively, they're solid. Galway, they've only conceded 7 goals this season, which is, other than Shells, it's probably Shells have conceded 9, and Galway have only conceded 7. So defensively, they're not giving a lot. They've not given up a lot. Now, they've only scored 7 as well, but it means they're in the game. And I know Owen was touching on it. It's probably something Pats need to do, because Pats have conceded 14, but they've only scored 12. And again, Galway are sitting just a point ahead of them, but Pats maybe need to become a little bit more difficult to beat, to give up too many chances. But yeah, it was a good game, a really good result for Galway. And it takes Rovers on to the Drogheda game tonight. And I was at the Sligo game, and Drogheda off the back of a really good, impressive 3-1 win against Sligo. So they'll be full of confidence going into this game, and they've a good record. They've done really well in recent years against Rovers in Tallaght. They've done really well last year. He scored an unbelievable goal. So it'll be interesting to see how tonight goes.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Drogheda there, I mean,
good segue that, Raf, wasn't it?
Yeah, you know, very good. You have a fine tradition for doing that.
You know, I love a segue. I'm not going to lie.
Indeed, it makes my life way easier. But what I was going to say in terms of Drogheda, so Piero, they've been sort of waiting for him to get going. He still hasn't. He did get the penalty as part of the turnaround against Sligo, the second goal, but it was really Markey's equaliser that it was brilliantly taken. That sort of helped spark Drogheda. And now, if you're from a Sligo and Waterford perspective as well, and you look at the table, and that win sort of changes the picture very, very quickly.
It does, yeah. And again, Drogheda fully merited the win. Sligo started the game really well. Fitzgerald down the left, with Hutchinson behind them, were the biggest threat. First 10 minutes, they go a goal up. They have another chance. And then Drogheda sort of regroup a little bit. Markey gets into the game. Technically, he's brilliant in really tight spaces. Probably doesn't have the power or the pace to really trouble you over the top from deep, like in terms of running down centre backs or through balls. But technically, he's brilliant. And then the tight pitch up in Drogheda, he excelled. He has moments in the game where he's excellent. But he comes on. It's only his first goal of the season, in fairness. But he comes on to and bends it into the corner. It's a really, really good finish from him. And Drogheda were good then up till half time. Came out. Sligo started the second half much better, and for the first 10 minutes, better side. Didn't really trouble Drogheda too much, and then Drogheda got into the game. They started getting balls into Pero, and like you said, Markey was playing off him. They done well in that. Then they nicked the penalty. He steps up and takes it, in fairness, and he done well. It was hard for him because a lot of the balls they were thrown into him, they weren't great, but he was trying his best, and you could see sometimes the fans get a little bit frustrated with him, and I'm thinking, give him a break. Like, he has a sit midfielder in front of him, he's 2 centre-backs hanging out of him, and his job at times is to probably stop the centre-back getting a really good header to put them further up the pitch. It might just be that it drops 5 yards and then Drogheda are able to grow up on the game a little bit, and he done that really well. He stopped them having clean headers, stopped them having clean clearances. And then Aaron McNally's goal at the end is really good. He cuts in, checks back and bends into the far corner. But Sligo just sort of, when it got to 2-1 and it got tough, Sligo sort of just down tools a little bit, and that would be the worry for John Russell. And it's something I worried about when I seen them last year, that they have lovely technically gifted players, but then when it really gets tough for them, sometimes you're thinking, right, be a bit more compact, but be really aggressive in what you're doing in terms of either on the ball or be aggressive, play forward, get it into your striker, play off him. They missed Mac Mata, in fairness. They probably missed him as the focal point because there wasn't really being held up. But Drogheda fully merited the win. And like you said, if Drogheda win their game in hand, they go level with Sligo. But again, Sligo have a game in hand over Pats that could frog them into 5th place as well. So it's really tight from Bohemians down. Again, Rovers sitting on 20 points, Bows on 19, and then Galway on 16. So, yeah, it's getting tighter down there.
Just on that Piero, the Piero playing up front for Drogheda, and I know, like you mentioned there, that he hasn't really, not you, Garth, but Raf, when he hasn't really got into it yet, and the swing of it big time, he got the penalty, whatever, but like he's instrumental in Marky's goal.
Yeah.
Like that, the long ball up, he holds it up, he gives it in, and then it just breaks after that. And like, see them big strikers, them big physical ones, like they're not really prolific. They never have really been like prolific strikers, but what they give you is huge. They can bring a whole team up a pitch, and he's doing that. Like as Garth touched on it there, like it mightn't be clean, it mightn't be he's getting up and winning the header, but the centre half isn't winning the header. It's that type of stuff, you know. And it's all them little 1% that win, and that's a huge benefit for Drogheda when they have such a kind of focal point like that up front for them. He is going to be a big player for them this year.
Yeah, and a very different profile of striker is Patrick Hooban for Derry City, and Will Patching had scored a penalty against Waterford just about 7 minutes before half time. But Hooban now, actually, when you look at it, since he's come back, he missed a couple of games, and then now own 3 goals in 3 games, and Derry all on their own in second. And maybe, they're still searching for that bit of consistency, especially away from home. This season seems to be the issue, but they'll definitely need Hooban sort of motoring.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think I've touched on this quite a bit about Derry. It's just keeping their best players fit is their biggest issue, I feel. At the moment, they're keeping Hooban fit. He obviously missed a couple of games, not too many. Comes straight back in. He's amongst the goals. And when you're looking at the game, like he's not just amongst the goals. He's playing lovely passes and stuff. He's playing through balls for Mullen and Mac Mullen and Daniel Kelly. And there's a great run by Kelly and a great ball into him for the penalty that they won. I wish he was on the pens, Hooban himself. If I was up there and I was a striker, I was like, strikers always take the pens. Like that's the confidence. Just keep the confidence high. Let them run away with it. That's the most confidence position of all the positions on the pitch. I'd say he's actually devastated. He's not on them when Patching is, but he does great.
He is on them when Patching isn't playing, isn't he, Doyle? He took one in Tala.
That wouldn't be good enough for me now. It's me. I need to know I'm on that pitch. If I'm not playing well, I'll at least score a penalty if it comes up. That's how I'd be thinking. But he done great for his other goal. It's great play by Daniel Kelly out wide. He nutmegs their left back, and it takes 2 players out. And Daniel's so straight on power. They're trying to finish it himself. Good save, but as good strikers do, Hooban's there just to pick up the pieces and knock it in. And at the minute, he's running away with the top goal scorer. He's on 9 goals, I think, and it's hard to see anyone pipping him. He's in a strong squad, strong team there to provide a lot of chances for him. But he's a big player for them. And Derry are quietly going about their business very, very well. Nobody's saying anything positive about them. People are talking about inconsistency, all that stuff. They're only 3 points off Shells. They're in 2nd place and they've yet to hit their best. So they'll be happy with how things are going up there, I'd imagine.
Yeah, and then Dundalk, Graham, so the Noel King revolution, the manager bounce has happened, 2-0 winners over Bohemian Scott High with a cracking goal from long range, and then Robbie Benson adding another one, and they seem to be very direct, just looking at the highlights in terms of how they approached a lot of shots from distance, a lot of pressure put on the Bows defence. But when you look at Dundalk and that, I suppose, that performance, Graham, how much of it do you feel is just like an initial manager bounce and whether it's sustainable or not, or how much of it was down to sort of like a Bows underperformance? Because they did have a penalty miss later on with Akintunde missing one, Shelby making the save.
I think it can be all of them things. I know that because, like Doyle touched on percentages, I think it can be all of them. Bows probably weren't at their best. Dundalk are obviously... They're playing they look to be more aggressive with the ball, which was a good thing. They look to have a simple messages that we're going to play forward, and if you get into wide areas, we're going to put in crosses. Set pieces, they look to be dangerous all night. A lot of their highlights is coming from set pieces where they're working on one, they're just dropping one short for Horgan to whip in, or and on the left side then as well, where they're just rolling it and they're whipping it straight in. So there seem to be like work on into them little things where you can see, right, set pieces, they're going to be a danger, they're going to be aggressive and get the ball forward, they're going to get into wide areas, they're not going to stand on ceremony. Like Eoin said, strikers just want early crosses into the box, so they don't have to make 2 or 3 runs. They're just going right, first run is bang and it's in, and I know I can set your watch to it. So there seemed to be, like, and in fairness to Noel King, he paid a lot of credit to Liam Burns and Brian Gartland after the game. So obviously that's work that they've done as a coaching staff to go into that. Benson's goal is brilliant as well. His touch is excellent. He composed himself and he reverses it. Dundalk should have probably had a penalty in the second half as well. They got a free kick on the edge of the box and it's half a yard inside the box, like, and that should be a penalty. I know Bowes would say, well, if they score their penalty with 20 minutes to go, then it's a different game. But I think for the first half alone, Dundalk probably warranted it. And if they are gonna, it looks like it's a little bit not as complicated as it was under Stevie. And I don't want to say that in a disrespectful way to Stevie O'Donnell, but when you bring in loads of players from the start of the season again, you're trying to get the message. And Eoin worked with Stephen, and tactically he's brilliant. But when you're changing it for every game, that message can get lost with players that you're unsure of, that you haven't worked with for a while. So I think if you have a simple message that this is their game plan, we know what they're going to do, this is how we might try and stop it. And it might just simplify for players that you just go out and, right, I just have to concentrate on 2 or 3 things rather than 5 or 6, especially with a new group of players when they're trying to gel together as well. And it looks like that seems to be the message, that it's quite simple but effective football, especially in this league too.
Yeah, obviously last week we did discuss Noel King's appointment, which I think came out of left field, including for him, because I think he was quite clear. He was doing his interviews after later in the day that he was as surprised as anybody, despite the fact obviously he has a long-standing connection with Brian Ainscough, the owner. But Paul Corey, I think when he was talking about it last week on the podcast, he felt it was a sort of strange appointment. And then Eoin, in your column on the RTÉ website on Friday, you also sort of had a similar view on the appointment in terms of, like, there were so many candidates, and then it ends up being sort of Noel King taking the job out, sort of to the surprise of many people. But there was one line in it that I thought was kind of interesting. I thought might get your thoughts on it. But the broader implication of King's appointment cannot be ignored. The decision seems to reflect a certain narrow-mindedness, a preference for familiar faces over fresh ideas. Obviously, you kind of expand on it in the piece, but it was an interesting point.
Yeah, I think, like, if you have all of us here that lovers of the League of Ireland and stuff, we just crave progression. We just crave it. We just want things to get a little bit better all the time. And at the minute, the League of Ireland is getting a little bit better all the time, and that's great. And a lot of the time, the things get better because they've got structures in place. Like, if you look at how the best clubs in the country are ran and how successful they are, they've all got great structures in place. Now, if you've got a director of football there and a CEO, and then they don't even know that a manager's been appointed until they come in after a match on a Friday night, it just kind of, it doesn't feel like everything is working and everyone's working together in the same direction. That was my point that I'm putting across to it. The fact that, like, the 70 applications there came in, did Brian Ainscough even look at any of them? I don't know. Maybe the lads, director of football, the CEO, turned around to Brian and said, none of these are good enough. But I know they had chats with some. They went after some. I think Keith Long was one that they went after. He came out and said that after the Pats game, that they approached them and Waterford wouldn't let him speak to them, which is fair. But to just pick up the phone and make the decision and get it done and it all agreed on, and for no one else in the club to have any say in it or have any dialogue between them for the appointment to happen, it just doesn't reflect well on the club. That's how I'd look at it personally. Like, the club's in a tough spot. Like, and even Noel himself said after the match that he's putting the result down to the good work that Brian and Liam Burns did up there. And to be fair, like, I've seen them live 3 times this year, and every time I've watched them, I've thought these are too good to go down. They've got enough. But then you're reminded again about how competitive the league is this year. That there's no UCD, there's no, without being disrespectful, there's no Finn Harps. That everyone's taking points off each other. So maybe, and I had a similar situation before my own career. I wrote about it in the column. I signed for Bradford, favourites to go up, and we finished rock bottom. We started terribly and never recovered, and things just got worse and worse and worse. So yeah, looking at it from the outside, not the greatest appointment in the sense of we're all craving progression. Nothing against Noel King here, just the process of how he's appointed. That's how it doesn't sit right with me, I suppose.
If you had went through the processes and still ended up in Noel King, then you're going, fair enough. That's what they went for. But like Owen said, first of all, really good article. Like I read it myself and I thought really good article. Second of all, I was thinking, how come I've been doing RTÉ for the last 4 years and I haven't been given an article, Raf? That's another thing that I want to know. And who's
we said people from Pala can't read or write. That's
who's ghostwriting that for Eoin Doyle? That's what I want to know. That's me 3 questions. They're the 3 I want to know.
Takes you 3 days to do.
I know. Well, I have 3 questions that I want answers to after this in an email. Strongly worded email.
Yes, I can pass on those concerns. I don't make these decisions.
But no, like it's like that. It's you're trying to get to a level where it's not just one man ringing his friend to go, do you fancy having a job? It has to be done better, so that, like you said, the people who are out there doing the pro licenses know that we're in with a chance of getting a job if we go through the right licenses, the right criteria, and we go and do our interviews properly. Because you do interview courses as well when you're on these coaching licenses, to be able to sit in and put across your ideas and your plan. And if all that's taken away because it's one phone call, and again, like I said, it hasn't gone through the right process, and it's nothing against Noel. Noel's a lovely fella, and you wish him all the success there. But
for
the league to move forward, there has to be due diligence done.
Yeah, and he's made a good start, so I will see how that goes.
Lucky Doyle, he's made a good start.
I'll get that column took off me fairly quick and say,
we got a new column next week. Gartland's in.
Yeah, but anyway, Finn Harp's got a mention there earlier. Owen, you mentioned theirs now. So just that turns us to the first division, where they lost 2-0 at home to Cork City, who have a bit of good news off the pitch. Well, regarding the pitch itself, actually, with the men's and women's teams, they're going to, Turner's Cross is back available from the 1st of May after works to repair the pitch. Obviously, they've had to reverse their fixtures and go on the road for the last while, but that's been sorted out. So Cork City, top of the first division at the moment, 2-0 winners. Up in Donegal. Athlone Town, where they also got a win 2-1 against Cove Ramblers. Bray Wanderers seem to be in reasonable form now, 2-0 winners over Kerry. UCD won 2-0 at Treaty United, and then Longford Town still rock bottom of the first division, 2-1 loss at home to Wexford. And in the women's Premier Division, Bows beat Treaty United 2-1. Peamount and Galway in a big game, which Galway have started the season brilliantly, but it ended up being scoreless between both teams. We'll come back to the Galway manager very shortly, Phil Trill, who was speaking to John Kenny afterwards. But before that, some of the other results: Shelburne with Pearl Slattery scoring the winner at Wexford, who remain bottom of the table. Cork City also in reasonable form, 1-0 winners away at Sligo Rovers. And then Athlone Town, they beat DLR Waves 3-0. Now, the Peamount game, they moved to a 3 at the back with Captain Karen Duggan shifting back into that trio, and they were able to keep the free-scoring Galway side, boasting the league's top scorers, Julianne Russell and Jenna Slattery, quiet on the Galway side. And Galway United manager Phil Trill, as I said, was speaking to John Kenny afterwards, and here's that interview.
Phil, what do you make of that? Both sides really cancelled each other out in that game, didn't they?
Yeah, I thought it was a fantastic game in terms of probably not many chances, but I think neither side sat in and accepted a draw. I think both sides went all the way throughout and tried to really get the win, and look, we're happy enough. Obviously we've been flying, but this is to come to Peamount and get a result in terms of a draw, clean sheet. Can't remember the last time a Galway team came here and got a clean sheet, so look, really positive overall.
Please, start of the season, 4 wins and a draw, and as you say, coming into the homes of the champions never going to be easy, is it?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's not. And Peamount changed their shape today, and again, I take that as a great compliment, in that we're doing things very well. In that, they're having to change their shape to try and get into the game against us. And look, I thought there was nothing in it. I think a draw is a fair result, but overall, look, happy in terms of how we started the season. Quarter of the way there, but it is a long way.
Yeah. Defensively, you look solid. It's very impressive with your goalkeeper, Jess Berlin. She's good, athletic, tall, commands her area well, doesn't she?
Yeah, look, we've 3 great keepers, but yeah, Jess had a good game today, and her kick out it's like a quarterback's throw. But yeah, he's very vocal, like, but that comes from the top. You know, you see how hard Julianne Russell works for everybody up top, and Lindsay, and, you know, all the way throughout the team. You see how hard we want to press and be aggressive, and sometimes that'll lead to chances, and sometimes, you know, they got in, and we need a goalkeeper then to make sure she minds his house.
There's still a long way to go, but obviously a very pleasing start from your point of view.
Yeah, excellent. You know, you think about it, I know Galway WFC was a previous entity, but for us to grow this within the space of a year, and the success we've had has been really, really positive. You know, Peamount have been champions for many, many years, you know, during their tenure, and I think for us...
They're the yardstick, aren't they?
Yeah, they are the yardstick, and like, you know, I think for us to be able to come up here and look and say, like, we gave as good as we got, and I think both sides would probably go home going, Jesus, you know what, at least we didn't underperform. You know, and that's always the fear at times, you know, you kind of go, I left that behind us. I think we can be a bit better. Peamount, I think they can be a bit better. So look, overall, a really good start to the season, and look, hopefully it continues next Saturday.
And okay, so in the Women's Premier Division at the moment, Galway United are top of the table on 13 points, ahead of Athlone on 10, and then Shells on 9, and then the reigning champions Peamount on 7, level with Cork City. And then the FAI Intermediate Cup final as well, which Anthony Pine previewed on last week's podcast. Glebe North were 3-2 winners over Ringman Rangers. That was after extra time, and Reese Weldon's penalty in those extra minutes at Weavers Park made the difference. So congratulations to Glebe North there, first time winners, and actually there would have been a new name on the trophy regardless of who won it there. But before we go, let's talk Champions League and Premier League. There's plenty to chat about. We've obviously got live coverage of Bayern Munich and Real Madrid live on RT2 and RT Player this Tuesday from 7:30. And Graham, looking at that fixture, Bayern are definitely going to be underdogs coming into it, but it might actually suit them because they went quite conservative against Arsenal 2 weeks ago over the two legs, and it worked out quite well. And whereas Real Madrid are quite streetwise and kind of hung in against City as well, I feel like the onus in this game is Real Madrid are going to be doing a lot more of the attacking, and Bayern are going to try and hit on the break with some of the pacey players they have.
Yeah, I think Bayern at home is always a tough game. We said that 3 weeks ago when I was on. I said I don't think Arsenal will get through against Bayern, and I said actually I think Real Madrid and Man City will be tricky as well. So I don't really want to pat myself on the back, but I might as well.
Give that man a column.
I know. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, yeah, I do look Bayern Real Madrid. It's one of the biggest games in European football. I'd fancy Madrid because the second leg is at home. That's the way I'd look at it. I think if it was the other way around, I'd probably make Bayern slightly favourites on it. But that's why it's so important that Bayern actually take the game to Madrid in Bayern and get a good result and a positive result that they can take to the Bernabeu in a couple of weeks. And that's the biggest tie around. Obviously Dortmund, PSG, and the other one, but just Real Madrid always find a way. They have enough, and they're comfortable in it. They're comfortable in. Do you know what the best thing I seen about the Man City game was? All the skillful players, they're flair players, they're attacking players. All these players that have these big reputations were all willing to work and go in and do a job. I'm willing to suffer and realise that, yes, City are going to have the ball for majority of it, but we can hurt them when we get it. And that's a blueprint to maybe playing against City, is that your top players have to do a good job, but they also have to be a threat when you get the ball. And in fairness to Madrid, they were excellent. And I think Jude Bellingham's interview afterwards, how relaxed Ancelotti is, that he's never going to get worked up or worried about who he's playing. So why do the players? And the simple fact is, it's Real Madrid. They're one of the biggest clubs in the world, if not the biggest. And they just have that aura about them in this competition that they never seem ruffled or panicked. And this fixture throws up some great games down the years. So hopefully it makes for a cracking tie.
Yeah, it probably helps Real Madrid, I suppose, Graham, as well. They don't have that thing like Barcelona there's a Barcelona way, so sitting in and trying to defend isn't really something they would want to do. They're probably allergic to that idea, or even an Arsenal might do it from time to time. But there's so many clubs that they have a way of playing, and Real Madrid, okay, they would prefer attacking football and flair and all that, but when it comes to winning, that's just the focus.
I think I was listening to Gary Lineker made the point that if Barcelona played that way and won, they'd still get hammered for it.
Yeah.
They need to dominate the ball and dominate the game, but Madrid are able to go, well, we're going to play in our moments, and they do, and then they score and they get goals, because the moments that they play in, Bellingham's ridiculous. Rodrigo's very good, ridiculously good as well. So that they're able to just produce moments of magic, and then they're able to go, right, let's go and have it and do a job. And it seemed like they're tight and they work for each other as well. And that even though they have superstars, doesn't seem like there's too many egos in it, that they're not willing to sacrifice their own ability for the team. And like you said, that's a very good point, that the style of play is that they win European Cups. Like, no matter how they do it, it doesn't matter. And that's why they have the most.
Yeah, and then on the other side, I suppose, on the Bayern side of things as well, I mean, Harry Kane has been individually outstanding this season. A couple more goals at the weekend against Eintracht Frankfurt, one from play. And there, I suppose there's that contrast. Real Madrid don't have a fixed focal point as a striker. They have Joselu who can come off the bench, but usually all the attackers, there isn't a specific centre forward there, whereas Kane, he represents that for Bayern, and they'll obviously need him to be firing at his best to get past Real.
No, absolutely. Yeah, all of their attacking players. I think that's one of the best things about Real is how well they defend. They actually defend like an Italian side, and obviously you have to give credit to Ancelotti in that sense, and to kind of show that like brilliantly against City in Manchester last week. But yeah, Harry Kane will have to be on form. Sané definitely will have to be on form. But it's the midfield battle. It's what I'm really looking forward to. You know, you've got like Kimmich and Goretzka in there against Kroos and either Camavinga or Modric, and like you're talking best midfielders in the world there. You know, all technicians, all know how to play the game brilliantly, all so experienced. So me personally, I think the game will be one of them in the middle of the pitch. But for me, like if you look at the whole thing, the whole competition is Bayern's to lose, really, or is Real Madrid's to lose in my eyes. I suppose if you look at it realistically, I kind of struggle to see how, without being disrespectful, I suppose you could say I am being disrespectful, how Eric Dyer is going to keep out Vinny Jr. and Rodrigo, especially if it's counter-attack football or anything. You wouldn't have the legs to anywhere near the legs to keep up with them. And then there's like other elements that you have to look into it as well. As like Madrid now, probably they've won the league at home domestically. Bayern, this is the only trophy you have to play for. This is the only, like, it's very rare Bayern Munich go through a season without lifting a trophy. This is all they have left. So that little bit of added hunger might help things, but looking at it realistically, I think the whole competition is Madrid's to lose.
Yeah, pretty much, because the other side, the draw, obviously, and the Wednesday night game, that is Dortmund PSG. So Dortmund hosting the first leg. Kylian Mbappe, he's going to be the centre of it all, Owen, I suppose, and a lot of the focus. I suppose he's the star. If you're taking both Dortmund and PSG together, he's the standout. But that second leg against Barcelona, and actually across both legs, he didn't really get going until after the red card that Ronald Araujo had, and that's when he started to get going. And okay, maybe Dortmund aren't in great form domestically; they got hammered by Leipzig at the weekend. But Mbappe does need a performance at some stage.
Yeah, and most times I watch him, he disappoints me. Obviously, you're watching the World Cup final and he's unbelievable. Like, big occasion, brilliant, give him the ball, scoring hat tricks. One of the best players you'll ever see. Obviously, I went to Viva to watch him when France came to town here. One of my lads took a video of him. It was 2.5 minutes long, and he didn't break past a walk in the 2.5 minutes. I don't ever remember the game I played in where I ever walked for that length of time in a match. Gareth might say something differently to you there now, but you'll have he is going to be huge. He's going to be mad. He's going to be, for his story as well, like he's leaving PSG at the end of the season if you can, and this is the one trophy that they've never won and they're desperate to win. And if he's the man that's able to do it for them, it's great. But yourself, football doesn't work like that, and the fairy tale never usually wins. So it's a PSG. I think they're too much for Dortmund. Dortmund's biggest threats, I think, for probably Sancho and Brandt from midfield, and they obviously have to really rely on the experience of Hummels at the back there. Whereas like PSG have the threat of Mbappe, Dembele, even Hakimi from right back is excellent. So it's going to be both fixtures I'm really looking forward to. But for me, it'll be a Real Madrid PSG final.
All right, so we will have that
I'll
to
go
look
with that
forward
as
to.
well,
But let's turn to
Post.
the Premier League title race here. And Graham, when you look at it, I mean, if we run through the fixtures first, we'll talk about Liverpool a little bit later on because I think they're out of it now. But let's say City and Arsenal, looking at the fixtures that are left. So City have Wolves next Saturday even, and then the following Saturday they have Fulham away, and then Spurs away 3 days after that on the Tuesday, and then they finish off at home to West Ham on the final day at home. And then you look at Arsenal, where they're hosting Bournemouth in the early kickoff this Saturday coming. Then the following Sunday, what's possibly a tricky match against United away from home. You never know what United in terms of they might actually turn up, and then final day they host Everton, who are now safe. I suppose both are out of the Champions League. Maybe City are going to benefit a bit more from being out of Europe at this stage with what they have to target.
Yeah. The fixtures that stand out for the tricky ones are Spurs away and United away. I think City's record away at Spurs isn't great. Spurs have always caused them trouble. Even before Postecoglou took over, they had a good record against them. And then United away. Arsenal going to United, you still fancy them because United just give up so many chances. But like the Spurs-Arsenal game yesterday, Spurs were excellent in terms of in possession and with the ball, looked poor from set pieces at times, gave up goals, but probably dominated the game. The thing with City, there's an inevitability to City that it can frustrate you, and you can sort of go, they're just going to win it. They just find a way to win games. They done that at the weekend, and the intensity wraps up when it gets to this stage of the season. You see Klopp Guardiola celebrates goals a little bit more because he knows. You've seen him with the header at the weekend. He's celebrating, and you can see it just ramps up at this stage of the season. And they go with him, in fairness. But it's just like whenever you think, they're in trouble here, they find a way to just come back and win a game. It's something Liverpool haven't done in the last while. But like you said, there's an inevitability to City. Where Arsenal, you don't know whether they're going to stay the course because they haven't done it yet. And it is the best chance they'll have to break that. They've 3 games to go. All 3 are winnable, in my mind. Everything at home's winnable. I remember they won it. I remember years ago, was it Tony Adams scored the last goal and they got the trophy at Highbury, wasn't it? Tony Adams scored the left foot.
Yeah,
over the top.
Like a little sort of volley kind of thing. Yeah.
There you go. Showing your age there, Raf. But
I'm older than I look.
But so maybe it's gonna history repeating itself. But again, Arsenal are the ones that have to do it, and City have been the ones that have stayed the course for a lot longer and have all the experience. So I still think it's City's league.
Yeah, and then Liverpool have dropped away now, Eoin, and a lot of the focus, and I suppose this is going back to the Merseyside derby defeat to Everton, where they lost 2-0, and Darwin Núñez and some of the other forwards, and the some of the work that's been done around finishing. And obviously, as a former striker, you might be able to give us a bit of an insight here. But Wayne Rooney was really interesting after the game, where he was talking about, from his experience at managing at Derby, that finishing drills aren't something that players get a lot of time to do after training, because with sports science and that now, that the load is very much managed and players are sort of brought back in, and there's that whole nature versus nurture debate as well, I suppose, with forwards as well. And I don't know, when you look at Darwin Núñez, do you feel finishing drills would help him, or is he that sort of naturally erratic that it can only kind of help a little bit incrementally?
Yeah, on what we're only saying there, he's bang on. Like, you'd nearly have to beg to do your extras now after training. It's kind of the amount of games that come thick and fast. They're very keen on your rest and recovery. Like, they treat it nearly as more important as your practice. But regarding Núñez, like, I love the chaos about him. Like for me, he'd be in my team every single week, just because you don't know what you're gonna get. He'll get you up the pitch, definitely get you up the pitch, carries the ball very well. And he gets himself into some great positions. Obviously, it's just that final piece, which is the hardest thing to do in football, is hitting the back of the net. But yeah, like, I'd say he probably just has to reset his brain and try to do the same finish over and over again. Like, if I was in his shoes and I was missing all these chances, and they're all so different, a lot of them are just power or whatever, I just, in my head, no matter the situation I'm in, I'm just going to roll it into that bottom corner with pace. That's all I'm going to do. No matter what, I'm not going to look at the goalie. I'm going to roll it in. And then it's a confidence thing. The next time, once he gets a couple of goals, when he goes through one goal, he'll know exactly what to do. He'll go through, he'll maybe be able to mega keeper or dink him or do whatever. And he's got that ability because he's scored some really good goals this year. And he's done very well. I think he's scored about 20 goals this season himself. But obviously, in the big moments is when Liverpool needed him and he wasn't really able to produce. And it's not just him. Like, Luis Diaz missed a few, especially that Man United game. That's probably when the it all started slowly falling down for Liverpool. The game at Old Trafford where they had loads of chances and couldn't finish them off, and they got punished in the end. But yeah, it's over for them now. Like it's City's to win. I can't even see, even if City were to come out and say they had 2 or 3 injuries, it'll be the 2 or 3 lads coming in. I'll go win them the league, no problem for me. It's if Arsenal came out and said they had 2 or 3 injuries, you'd really worry if they're going to be able to pick up the results in the next few games. But yeah, disappointing end to Liverpool. It's a disappointing end to Liverpool in the sense of how close it could have been for the romantic story for Klopp. But if you zoom out and you look at the start of the season, new team, whole new midfield, there was worry whether they're going to finish top 4, and they overachieved. They stayed in everything right up until the very end, bar the European run or whatever, getting knocked out by Atlanta. But apart from that, when you zoom out and you look at it and go, right, you know what, he's built a good foundation there for this next gaffer coming in to try and kind of kick them on again, maybe add a defensive midfielder and for someone to really work with Nunes, I suppose you could say, to make him be more clinical.
Yeah, and that next manager, and I suppose this is where we're going to finish up here, Graham, in terms of the Premier League, and that is Arne Slot, the Feyenoord manager, who looks in line to be taken over from Jurgen Klopp. He's got a lot of decisions to make when it comes to the summer, and probably highlighted in a way with Mo Salah's form, but also the little row on the sideline with Jurgen Klopp, and then his comments afterwards in the mix zone as he was walking through, which maybe are possibly being misinterpreted, or maybe it was the sarcasm that was meant to be there, but. Klopp has overachieved with this squad. A new manager coming in has a lot of work to do.
Yeah, he does. And he's replacing an iconic symbol at Liverpool as well. And in terms of what Klopp has done, he's also going to probably try and be, I think it's the first Dutch manager to try and win a Premier League, which I don't think anyone has done from Holland before. There you go, Raf. There's a good stat.
That's a great stat.
Have that one. But yeah, but I think they've looked at his style of play and thought, right, that will suit what we're doing. He's going to be head coach, so Michael Edwards is going to be the one that's running Liverpool by the sounds of it and his team, and that's the way they want it. And I think it got to the stage where Klopp was having to say and everything. The Salah one it frustrates me a little bit when I hear people online saying, "Oh, sell him, get rid of him now," and all, and I'm like, if he had left last year for the money, you would have said he was disloyal. And now all of a sudden, Liverpool or certain fans of Liverpool are like, we've had enough of him. Now you move him on. And that's the bit that always frustrates me in terms of being an ex-player, that you question a boy's loyalty, you question a player's loyalty when they want to move, but when you want to move them on and they say, actually, I prefer to stay, loyalty doesn't work both ways in football sometimes. And what Salah's done for Liverpool since he's arrived has been phenomenal. He's been unbelievable. And you look at him, never causes any trouble. You never see him any headlines about any Liverpool players. And I know he has the odd spat, but who doesn't? And all strikers are temperamental. You know what I mean? It's always about, can they play on the edge and score goals? And that's all they want to do. And Salah's probably frustrated he hasn't scored enough goals, and he probably feels he has credit in the bank that he should be starting these games because of what he's done in his career. And Klopp sort of saying, well, actually, no, if I'm laying down a marker in that, I want us to be more clinical in the final third, and that applies to all of them. But in terms of what Klopp has done for Liverpool and the new manager coming in, I think he's been given a fantastic base. You look at when Klopp took over, there's 2 new stands gone in. I know that's the club that's done that, but it's off the back of the fact that there's success and there's people that want to come and watch them. They built a brand new training ground for not just the first team, but also the academy. So there's a lot of infrastructure gone on under Klopp's reign, as well as success. And they're going up against an absolute behemoth in Man City in terms of the financial power they've had. And only for Liverpool keeping them that honest, it would have been City won everything. So I think he deserves a lot of credit. And I think the new manager coming in, has a great base to work from in terms of everything going on at Liverpool.
Yeah, but for the moment anyway, their involvement in the title race, I think pretty much, not mathematically, but in reality, is all over. But Graham and Eoin, thanks very much for your time. Now, before we go, obviously, you just wanted to mark also the fact that former Ireland defender Charlie Hurley died last week at the age of 87. He won 40 caps between 1957 and 1969 and made over 400 appearances for Sunderland. And Niall Quinn was speaking to Tony O'Donoghue about his memories of Charlie Hurley and what he meant to both Sunderland and Irish football. So that's what we're going to play out with now.
Yes, Tony, very sad news about Charlie this morning. A great man. It was a pleasure to meet him, a pleasure to be in his company. And in an Irish context, he was a truly inspirational footballer, a rock at the heart of the defence, courageous, brave, tough, but fair. I'm told he'd go through you with a dose of salt, but he'd pick you up and ask you, are you okay afterwards? That passed on too then to Sunderland, because up there it became even bigger. He's a complete icon, and I say is because he will continue to be a complete icon. You must remember when he was doing his stuff for Sunderland back in the day, the people up there had shipbuilding and they had the coal mines. And when they'd come up at the weekend and go to a game, he was their inspiration. He was the one that drove the team forward, and they could see from his bravery, his courage, his leadership that their club meant something to them. And he will always be known as the King in Sunderland. And I think another sort of point to say about his legacy, there are still kids getting tattoos up in Sunderland of Charlie Hurley, the King. Who else in the 60s who played football would be getting that today? An amazing man. Very sad news. Had the great pleasure of being in Cork with him. Roy Keane brought the Sunderland team to Cork in 2007. Charlie came with us, brought him to his house where he was born, where he'd lived his early life. Quite emotional, but brilliant time. Great time for everybody. Great man. Just so sad to hear of his passing, but his legacy is secure, that's for sure.